Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you and welcome back. Good conversation. I'm certain to keep us right on track, we have 3 or 4 lightning talks ahead of us in similar format, obviously, just to keep it moving. So, come on out, Haley. You're hiding. Where are you? Come on out beside me, Haley. There we go. So, our next speaker is Haley Simons. It's actually Dr. Haley Simons, isn't it? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Haley is the co-founder and director of Alberta Creativity Network and president of Creative Alberta. She's a musician, an educator, and an arts education advocate for her community. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Haley.
I was asked once, is it a medical doctor or is it an academic doctor? Not a medical doctor. And thank you for including this, what my sister so kindly referred to as middle-aged piano teacher, in your innovation talk today. I am hoping to talk about innovation and really get to the bottom of it and see what it is and where it comes from. The Alberta Creativity Network is actually part of a larger organization called the National Creativity Network. Our founding chair is Sir Ken Robinson, so we have an incredible creativity bias and I think some creativity street cred as well. We share the belief that creativity matters profoundly to the health and the promise of our society, and that it's not only possible to develop and cultivate creativity, but that we have no choice but to do so. These are some of my colleagues who have contributed to this presentation. And of course, our speakers have mentioned we live in a time of great change, locally and globally. See, the hillbillies made it with the Flintstones today, and we saw some Disney, so you can tell the age of this audience, right? It's fascinating how some regions really embrace change, and some kind of ignore the call because they figure they don't need to fix what ain't broke. I have a friend who used to teach air traffic control in air traffic controller school, and he tells this story about the day his students take their final exams. And as they're sitting sweating over their radar screens and obviously really stressed, he walks up behind them and touches them on the shoulder and says, "Relax, what's the worst that can happen?" There's almost a universal response to this call for change, and that's the veneration of innovation as this jackpot solution. And it's an ideal that virtually every provincial and federal leader endorses the need for a broad program of innovation. Because innovation is sexy. And it's become this enigmatic superhero who's supposed to rescue us from all our economic and environmental and societal woes. But there is no such thing as instant innovation. It's not a trendy word, it's a really complex ethos, and it's sustained primarily by its 2 slightly less sexy cousins, creativity and imagination. And of those 3 elements, imagination comes first. Any conceptual breakthrough requires imagination, and without a healthy, well-fed, and nurtured imagination, there is no creativity and there is no innovation. So it's such a good thing we have an abundance of it on the internet, online. Actually, our imaginations are literally, not figuratively, being hijacked relentlessly and pervasively, and we're bombarded daily by these ideas of rampant and vapid consumerism. And how do we circumvent that situation? And the best bet is obvious. It's been mentioned earlier today at the most foundational stage, which is education. It's not innovation, it is education that is the key to the future. It is the superhero, and it's where it all begins. But this superhero is encountering some problems right now. This is where I go, don't be alarmed, I'm gonna go off slide for a second. Off script, oh no, she's going off script. I have a 15, almost 16-year-old daughter who is scheduled to be delivered by C-section on September 11th, 2001. But her delivery date was bumped the week earlier because both my obstetrician and her pediatrician were going to be attending a medical conference on September 11th in New York City. And both doctors were just a couple blocks away when the first strike hit, and there I lay in bed glued to the TV, as I'm sure everybody was, in this stunned mortification as I held this perfect, incredible being. And at that moment, I was terrified for her future. When the 9/11 Commission wrote its final report, it described a litany of failures from planning and communications to coordination and follow-through, but the most damning was what they called a failure of imagination. There was no failure of innovation cited. The government had simply failed to imagine such a stunningly symbolic attack. And so among their recommendations was that going forward, the intelligence agencies had to, and here's that quote, routinize imagination. And so they did the next obvious thing. They hired the foremost performing arts institution in the world, New York's Lincoln Center, to teach them imagination and to lead the way. Changing our community or our economy or our world at any scale demands a lot. It demands a deep understanding of how to move ideas and people across networks and systems, and it demands relentless effort, and it demands a purposefully cultivated imagination. So whether the next economy is going to be a creative economy or driven by green tech or nanotech or space tech or something else entirely, unless we feed our collective capacity for imagination, we can be sure that these cherished innovations simply will not exist. Educating for creativity points to a fundamental shift to empowering communities and learners to create a culture of hope. That is a Lego vacuum. If you're a parent, that's amazing. You know, you've stepped on Lego. Education has the power to unlock the imagination, and creativity can coexist peacefully with standards and accountability. And innovation may be our golden ticket, but creativity and imagination hold the key to the future, because we have to be able to imagine a better world in order to create it. And creativity takes us there. This innovation we so desperately desire begins and ends with education. Please remember that education isn't an institution. It's not a curriculum we sit around and try and design. It's not a concept, it's a who. That's who we're doing it for. It's not a consumptive practice, it's a creative practice. So we're left not just with a challenge, but with an opportunity. Creativity offers an opportunity to collaborate and build the bridges between the sectors. It offers us an opportunity to co-create our future, to live out of our imagination for a better life for us all. And in the words of my friend Graham, what's the worst that can happen?
Good job, Haley. A Lego vacuum. Wow. Okay. Really? Okay. So she used a couple phrases, and maybe I've used one of them: normalize creativity, routinize imagination. So, Haley, you credited the U.S. federal government. I believe we'll just put your name underneath that. It'll live into eternity. Routinize imagination and normalize creativity. Thank you, Dr. Simons Haley. Haley Simons. Dr. Simons, Dr. Haley Simons. Our next speaker is Dar Schwanbeck. Dar is the Managing Director of the Northern Alberta Business Incubator located in St. Albert. He has over 38 years as a practicing management consultant and extensive postgraduate work in healthcare, sales and marketing management, market research, customer satisfaction, and leadership development. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the creator who seeks to make something new or better, everywhere you look is something unsatisfying. Dissatisfaction is fuel for innovation. So is the ability to app, automate, or robotize. Unfortunately, a lot of this innovation has little to do or little benefit for the customer. Hang on to your seats. We're going to try to share 20 years of experience in 7 minutes. And for those of you who want safety cards, if you stop at our booth on the way, you will be able to pick up a safety card as a reference for the 20 years in 7 minutes. So on with the show. Innovation does not necessarily require us to focus on customers. In this definition, the customer is not mentioned. There are lots of new toasters, but few really help customers. Instead, features are used to differentiate from competitors. At NABI, we use a system called C3. It is a system for transformation. We have two main things to consider. Who is it we are trying to satisfy? Is it customers or us, the producers? And then, what specifically is it regarding their priorities that we are targeting? Is it outcomes? Is it product functions or features? Or is it the acquisition process we have for them to secure the products? We have 8 possibilities to work with. We would argue that the first priority should be customer outcomes, areas 1 and 2. How well and quickly customers get those results reveals our alignment with their expectations. Yet little innovation actually addresses customer outcomes. Why is that? Our assumption is that if we fix dissatisfaction, our customers will be satisfied. Often not the case. When a customer leaves dissatisfied, we ask a lot of questions. If we don't ask the right questions, we will never discover the outcomes the customer wanted to achieve in the first place. All we are doing is fixing a problem, and there are endless problems. Instead, we propose that we should ask the strategic 5 whys. What would it take to satisfy customers? This is aspirational, trying to understand the real purpose that customers have when they first come to us. Here is an example of a student applying for a loan. Our first priority should be to ask why 5 times. When we get to the 5th why, we're approaching a strategic approach. The 8 dimensions are critical areas we must pursue to achieve excellence. Focus on all 8 and excellence can be enhanced. Improve a few and excellence will be limited. The top 4 areas drive customer satisfaction, the bottom 4 areas efficiency. Long-term, our viability depends on customer outcomes. The goal is to be able to succinctly answer question 4, but the answer is dependent on answering questions 1 through 3 in that order. The questions are not remarkable. It is the process of answering them that produces insights that lead to innovation. The first thing is to be very clear about what our product is. The product is the only concrete thing we can characterize. We cannot give our customers results, and customers only experience process. A product is a deliverable we give to others, very specific to the producer. The definition of our product anchors the pursuit of innovation. Once we are clear about our product, we can differentiate who are the customers. If we're not careful about these early definitions, there will be much confusion in determining customer expectations. Who is the customer? We tend to talk about customers as an amorphous group, or to organize them as internal and external. This segmentation obscures the 3 basic specific roles we can have with a product. The customer's role is always determined by a specific product. This is relevant whether the product is consumed externally or internally. A customer is anyone who receives a product to use it to achieve a desired outcome, the end user, transfer it to someone else who needs it, a broker, or transform, repair, or modify it, the fixer. Each customer role has its own set of expectations, so when we seek to innovate, we should connect with all 3. Once we get the first 2 questions answered, question 3 challenges us to reveal customer expectations. What outcomes, desired and undesired, do customers want? What products and features? What product acquisition process do our customers want? If we want innovation that matters, we need input from all 3 customer roles. Customer expectations are considered the basis for determining what quality means. Customers have expectations about product attributes and the outcomes to be achieved. These are stated as the voice of the customer. The 8 dimensions are a succinct way to identify the critical few areas we must pursue to achieve excellence. Areas 1 through 4 drive satisfaction. To deliver innovation that matters, our goal is to capture all of the voices of the customer for each of our products. So if we don't do real innovation, if we want real innovation, how many voices would there be for each product? Well, let's do the math. There are 3 customer roles and 4 dimensions of excellence. We have 12 voices of customer that we should consider. Few organizations go that far. Because they don't, we get stuff that sucks. We all know this. Tools are required for assembly or to break into the package. We spend inordinate amounts of time with development permits or learning new software applications. Products are shipped incomplete. We automate stuff because we can, yet all it does is add complexity. All I want is washrooms that work at public events. What do customers want? They want to be heard and to be understood. They want ease of use. They want timeliness. They want products that are certain, consistent, reliable, accurate, and predictable. They want variety of choice and low cost to own, and they want to be entertained. If you are the leader of the organization and you want innovation, it's your job to set the goals and outline the compelling reason for change, ideally from the customer's point of view. Your innovation initiative will take you through these steps. Once we understand what customers really want and what their priorities are, we are now set to align those with our strategic and operational priorities. When we see gaps, we have compelling reasons for innovation. So, define all work as products, differentiate 3 customer roles, reveal expectations for outcomes, functions, and features, transform and align operational priorities with customer expectations. It's as easy as dirt. It is a tough crowd. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dar. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, some themes are starting to emerge. So, Jim really set the tone when he talked about the exponential rate with which we must think. Haley and Cynthia talked a lot about the creativity and the imagination that must exist. It really juxtaposed over what Jim was talking about is how do you basically take the creativity and the imagination and have it work at exponential rates that Jim spoke about. And the challenge that Dar spoke of is how do you view the customer, especially if the customer is changing or possibly changing at exponential rate. He didn't talk about that, but that has the potential. The customer is changing at a tremendous speed. And I'm sure that Brian Baczynski, who's in the newspaper business, I'm sure they face it all the time, is what is that, what's the future, what's the customer look like next year, next week, in a decade? A real challenge. And Kurian spoke about making sure as you move through that process that you try to tell stories, to try to storyize it, to bring your imagination to stories. So, which takes us now into a couple of our next lightning talks. And our next lightning talk is Rod Schatz. Rod is the managing director of Alidade Strategies. He recently co-authored a book and has had several senior executive roles specializing in building new business capabilities. And Rod has served our community in so many capacities, and we really thank you for joining us today. Please join me in welcoming Rod Schatz. Thank you.
Thank you. So my talk is really interesting. It's ironic. I'm going to summarize a lot of the themes that have been talked about earlier this morning. So go ahead. So the key question is the local business or local government business model under threat due to disruption? So Dar asked me to pull together a presentation about this. So our local governments really serve the fabric of our society. We all live in communities, and the key question is, what is technology going to do to disrupt our communities? So as Dar really alluded to, we live in the age of the customer. So everybody walks around with a mobile phone. That's changed the paradigm of where we've started. So we had the age of manufacturing, the age of distribution, and we're really in the age of the customer. We have choice, and we exercise that choice through our mobile phones. The key thing is what this really does is it changes the model of the local government to what the customer wants. And what we have in local governments, though, is we still have a lot of industrial processes of in-person meetings, printed and faxed documents, my favorite, non-digital or paper digitized, which isn't really technology-based. And what this all means is local governments are struggling in many ways. So we all know in St. Albert, taxes are increasing exponentially. I know, Nolan, you said it's only gone up a small amount, but I'm a taxpayer. Increasing administration size, burdened by industrial processes, and the key thing, increasing citizen expectations. And what all local communities have coming is the millennials who are completely digital based. The one thing as I was pulling this together is I started to think about, and we heard a lot about this earlier this morning, about culture. So bylaws are really designed for the industrial era and not for the digital era. And the key thing is that's one of the stumbling blocks that communities are going to have to transform to digital is culture, and in particular for local government bylaws. But thankfully, we're standing at the dawn of a digital revolution. And so Jim talked a fair amount about this, and I'll pull together some themes around what all this really means. I actually thought I was going to run out of time, but it looks like I'm actually going a little faster. So myself, Anshman, and Brian, who unfortunately is not here, we wrote a book on digital disruption. How the book started was almost 4 years ago. The four of us were getting together on a regular basis, and we were looking at each other going, something is happening, but we couldn't put our finger on it. What was happening? So we wrote a book targeted at the C-suite, so executives, to really understand how to identify disruption. And what we uncovered was disruption is being made possible by a number of things. Open source technology, the proliferation of cloud, so we heard and talked about Moore's Law, mobile. My favorite are the next three, the Internet of Things, big data, and artificial intelligence. So I've been spending the last 6 months in the artificial intelligence space, and I'm blown away what all this means. And the new value proposition for organizations and local government is value to speed, or speed to value, sorry. So how quickly can we get a new service up and running? So Mark Zuckerberg talks about how they get products out to market in Facebook, and it's all about getting it out and knowing that it's not perfect. So local governments need to digitally transform. So what does that mean? It means personalized customer outcomes. Dar talked about understanding the customer. The local government, for the most part, through those industrial processes, is separate from its customer. It means transforming the business models and how services are delivered, unleashing workforce innovation and efficiency. And it also leads to citizen engagement. So citizens want to interact everywhere digitally. So many of you are tweeting out how these presentations are going. We interact digitally. Local governments need to figure out how to interact with that. And what it all means is data-driven. This is one of the things we learned in the book. It's at the heart of all of this is managing information properly. And that leads me to my next point. So all the council members, I've been after you guys for almost a decade. It's all around open data. The innovation that can come from having open data available to the community is massive. And then what it also leads to is automated data collection and analytical capabilities. So I pulled together a bit of a scenario, and I wanted to see if it was possible. Could we automate when a park needs to be mowed? And the answer is yes. So through a simple webcam, the webcam can actually determine if the grass is at a certain height. I actually found Honda makes the equivalent of an iRobot, so the iRobot vacuum cleaner, that automatically mows the park. This is here today. So what it means, and Jim talked about this, is connected and smart things are here. So we're going to have the autonomous cars. What this is really going to mean is it's going to revolutionize traffic management. No longer will we have to wait at red lights. Cars are going to automatically know how to queue. Smart infrastructure around preventative maintenance. The real thing, and as I mentioned, I've spent the last 6 months in the artificial intelligence space, is it's turning all of this information that we collect into actionable insight. And It's automating repeatable tasks. Jim talked about the loss of jobs. Local government, a lot of the jobs and tasks done in the local government are ripe for automation. And the key thing is we also have other technologies to help us. So as I had on my previous slide, local government's open from 9 to 5. We as citizens want to interact with our local government 24/7. There's new technology, artificial intelligence-based chatbots where we can interact with digital services. And again, these aren't things that cost billions of dollars. They're here today. What they do is they help decrease administrative costs, increase citizen engagement, or as Dar talked about, our customer, and they leave the industrial era behind. But the key thing is we need to rethink how services are delivered in our local governments. And what it ultimately means is there's a new role that's needed in the local government. And as I labeled it there, the Chief Innovation Officer, somebody who bridges the gap between a service delivery, the customer, and figures out how technology bridges that gap effectively. And to answer the question I posed at the beginning, is the local government business model under threat? Absolutely, and it's time for digital action. I actually think that was my last slide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was. Thank you very much, Rod. Thank you. Thank you. That was great. And Rod, I couldn't agree more. And let me just give you a little bit of a perspective. And this is me not being political. It's just me being straight. So the direction from council a couple of years ago, maybe it's 3 years ago now, was to put together the Citizens Committee, the Resident Committee, along with dozens of presentations from various groups in the community and outside the community on what would it take for St. Albert to move forward in what we called and deemed to be a smart city initiative. And that's the result of the 230-page document. Some of the folks that were involved in that committee are in the room, and we need to thank them for that work. And Rod is so right that we must take another look at the way we do many, many things. And many have asked me, well, why would I step aside? Why wouldn't I run again? Well, in reality, like any elected official or any group that are at a governance level, you do need a different view of things, because after 13 years, I become part of the problem, not part of the solution. So this your last recommendation, which was an innovation manager or something, I forget what you called it, that's the kind of thinking that has to happen at local government, provincial government, federal government. Otherwise, you do get the you do get the navel gazing, you do get the non-creative ways of dealing with things. So thank you for that provocative approach. And so give him another round of applause. Thank you, Rod. Where's Paul? Paul, are you still out there? Here, come on up, Paul. Paul's going to be giving another provocative talk. And for those of you who don't know Paul is the Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of the Canadian Automated Vehicles Centre of Excellence. He's an internationally recognized thought leader on the socioeconomic impacts of the autonomous vehicles and has over 24 years of experience in transportation design and construction. Ladies and gentlemen, we could probably take 14 minutes with Paul on this topic, but we're only going to give him 7. But still, you're going to enjoy this. Please join me in welcoming Paul.
Okay, so autonomous vehicles, it's a bit like the internet. If you'd have had a couple of years warning for you, your business, of what it means, the internet, how it's going to transform your life, your work, you'd have been in a better position. And what I'm going to hopefully do with this talk is give you that advance warning, because change is coming. Many presenters mentioned this subject, and it's happening. It's happening very quickly. It isn't here yet, but when it does arrive, its impacts are going to be profound. So, huge impacts. Safety, it's going to save potentially up to 4% of GDP. Just that's how much accidents cost us. Emissions, most of these vehicles are being electric, and it's going to improve the air. Time in congestion, a shared system. We're not going to be owning vehicles anymore. I'll explain more why. So autonomous vehicles, it's part of this convergence of technologies. This was mentioned earlier, connected vehicles, electric. This makes most sense in the cities. Shared, just like Uber, but this is going to be transportation as a service for us. And this all combines to give us this profound change in mobility, a $10 trillion sector. These vehicles are already actually on our streets. The Tesla Model S and X that have been built since October last year are all one software update away from being autonomous. And the new Tesla Model 3, which is going to be manufactured in hundreds of thousands of those will be on the streets of Alberta in the next couple of years. Ford and Baidu are both saying that they're going to be mass manufacturing autonomous vehicles by 2021. Delphi and Mobileye, now bought by Intel for $15 billion recently, they're saying they'll have an automated driving system by 2019. And GM and Cruise Automation have a fleet of 130 vehicles, now the largest in the world. Waymo, this has come out of Google team, they are actually looking at having a fleet of 600 vehicles being used by the citizens of Phoenix by the end of probably this year, early next year, to work out how they commercialize their autonomous vehicle system. So this is really close, really close. This technology is going to take many forms. We're going to have electric shuttles moving us about. We're going to have two-seater pods. We're going to have large trucks. We're going to have sidewalk-friendly robots. And how's this for imagination? Pods that go around suburbia, they pick us up, they combine into a road train and move into the downtown core with the passenger density of a bus. It's going to massively impact existing business models, taxis, car share, car rentals, ride share, Uber, transportation network companies. They all will have the same looking business model. You hire a vehicle when you want it, and you off-hire it when you've finished with it, okay? That's profound. That changes up, that disrupts so many existing business models. And once we start to share these vehicles, we move from the current 1.1 to 1.2 average vehicle occupancy, we start ride-sharing shared autonomous fleets, suddenly the congestion problem is solved. What does that mean for LRT? I think it seriously undermines LRT, and for a well spread out city like St. Albert and Edmonton, we've really got to consider that. Autonomous vehicle zones, I've been pushing this subject for years now. I think cities are going to be rushing to become the first to have ban human drivers effectively, and this has already been discussed in LA, Singapore, and Helsinki. And this will have a profound impact on quality of life, promote walkability. Secretary of Transportation, Anthony Fox, the last one, he said he thinks we're going to get this tech within 5 years, and he should know he's well placed. And this is a $10 trillion mobility market. So the niches within that $10 trillion market themselves are going to be worth billions of dollars. And so this is the opportunity for St. Albert. So autonomous vehicles, they're going to do work, they're going to move people and goods, they're also going to be transporting services and actually performing services. And the data gathering side, I see these vehicles as the making of the Internet of Things and the making of the smart cities. The value of the data will be multiple times the value of the vehicles. So we've really got to exploit that. And the profound thing about this product is when it's certified safe to drive unmanned, it's going to do work. So whoever owns it is going to make money. And that leads to rapid market penetration. We've never had a product like this. But the automakers and the manufacturers won't be selling these. They'll provide a service. They make more profit, and we're better off not owning vehicles. Now, this could lead to a dystopian future. We just end up with more cars because everyone can own them, and that means more traffic, more parking, more emissions. Or we choose to go the ride-share route, and that's what public transit is all about anyway. It's just we begin to ride-share these things, we're better off, and that leads to less traffic, less parking, less emissions. In fact, with the Conference Board of Canada, CAVCOE did a study, and we estimated the average family would save up to $3,000 a year just by not owning a vehicle. That one autonomous vehicle will replace anywhere from 2 to 13 private vehicles. That means the market penetration is massively leveraged. This will happen really quickly indeed. Last time this happened, here's photos from New York's Fifth Avenue. Top left, it's 1900. There's one automobile in that photograph. Bottom right, 1913, that magic 13 years, coincidence. And there's only one horse in that photograph. This can happen much quicker this time. In fact, I'm estimating that in Alberta, By 2025, we'll have reached a tipping point with this technology that everyone, every business, every individual will realize they're better off if they have it. So if they haven't already got it, they're going to be really on board at that point. So it's going to be profound. It's going to happen really quickly. What does this mean for businesses in St. Albert? Well, I was driving around the industrial parks here. We've got auto body repair shops, we've got tow truck companies, we've got car dealerships and second-hand car sales. All of these businesses and many more logistics will be profoundly impacted by this. We need to prepare those businesses because this technology is coming. As a city, we're going to have automated snow plows. We're going to have automated grass cutting and parks maintenance. We're going to have delivery robots on the streets. We're going to have security robots roaming around on the sidewalks. These are all going to be collecting data, performing tasks, performing services. These are autonomous robots. So it's a big deal. Think of it as a physical internet. You will be affected. Your business will be affected. It's going to disrupt your business and operational models. It's going to impact the oil economy because most of these vehicles will be electric. And it's going to be here very soon. So what can St. Albert do? One of the things I didn't put on my next slide is we should have a champion for this technology. Let's hope St. Albert can be an early AV adopter. Let's plan, let's do consulting, let's protect and grow our businesses so that they don't get swamped by this technology change. It's going to improve the quality of life, so it's going to attract people, investment dollars and organizations. So let's prepare for a very different future. Thank you.
Thank you. Snap, you're okay? Rod, could you come back up, please? Thank you. Come out here for a second, Paul. Where's Melissa? Is Melissa here? I can't. Can I have some house lights, please? Thank you. So, Rod and Paul really provided kind of some practical thinking and applications for creativity. And it's beyond imagination and creativity. It's upon us, but in terms of some of the implementation. So we have about 7 or 8 minutes. And if anybody has a question for Rod about where he spoke about local government, or for Paul who spoke about autonomous vehicles, I'd like to entertain some questions, and then we'll be breaking for networking and lunch for about 45 minutes. So Melissa, do you see anybody waving their hand for a question? There we have one question over here. You can yell it, I'll repeat it, but however you want. Go ahead.
Anyway, with regard to the open data in the municipal government level, when can we expect to see that in St. Albert or any of the surrounding communities?
Yeah, good question. So, Rod, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on what you think, the speed with which and what you know and what you know we're not doing. I'm putting you on the city spot, but that's okay. Go ahead. Come over here come over to the microphone, Rod.
So obviously I don't represent the city. So I mean, I can speak to City of Edmonton. City of Edmonton's done a really good job of opening up data. The City of St. Albert, as far as I know, doesn't really have any data sets that I've seen personally. I do look at, it was probably about 12 years ago, as part of SADAC, we did a big study for the city to understand its business makeup, and it was really hard to get access to that data, and that wasn't even open. That was us being part of a council initiative. So city hasn't been great, as far as I know, on open data.
Where is Gord Kuhlman? I don't see Gord. Gord, rather than you answering it, if you have some questions around open data, what we're doing and what the plans are, Gord is the director with the city for our IT department. So rather than put you, bringing you up here, you've got some questions for that, obviously. And the person in the back, I didn't see his name. I didn't see who he was. Okay, could you at least check space with him? Thank you. Next question. Yes, come on up. Yes, Kathy Heron, I'll repeat your question. Go ahead, Kathy. For Paul, okay.
So, I'm a believer. A couple years ago, you emailed me and said, go to the election, and I still think we can check it right away, but I don't believe it, so my problem is, my question is, what does it do for local governments or on urban sprawl? If we're trying not to lead to, the argument on urban sprawl is that the environment is driving their gas and their diesel too far every day and garbage trucks, etc. But
Okay.
It's going to be hard for us.
Sure. So Kathy's question of Paul is, what's the impact on sprawl if we are sitting and the vehicles are out moving around the world? Go ahead.
Yeah, and Kathy's very right to be concerned. There will be sprawl. On the converse, there will be intensification. If you looked on an aerial view of the city of St. Albert, I would guess about 25% of it is parking lot. We won't need those parking lots. We're going to be able to start converting them. We can be putting more residential, more intensely, more dense residential areas in, which is actually lower cost for the city to service with utilities and the like. But yet, that's a fascinating problem, Kathy. We do have to address that, and that's one of dozens of big picture questions that the city and other cities will need to address.
Gord Koolman, come on up. I think it is important that you answer this question because I think it's too compelling of a question that got asked earlier. Can you change the traffic on St. Albert Trail so there's not so many frickin' lights? Yeah, that's exactly.
Would you like me to answer, sir? About the traffic lights?
So Gord Koolman is the director, no, not the traffic lights, just stay away from that one. Gord Koolman is our director of IT, and Gord, if you can kind of give a 1-minute recap to the first question is, what are the 2 or 3 or 3 or 4 things that we're doing from an open data point of view? Policy-wise or otherwise?
So this year with open data, we now have a council policy which actually makes it possible. Plus we have the internal directives to make it possible. So we're starting this fall with a small roughly 10 data sets and some of the infrastructure we need to make it possible. We also have a business case which will be before council for the fall budget, which would give us the resources to do a much bigger open data program during 2018.
Thank you. Thank you. How much is that? How much is that business case? How much money are we talking about to get to the next stage?
Not very much, a couple $100,000.
A couple $100,000. Okay, thank you. Next question. We have about 3 or 4 minutes. We could take another 1 or 2 questions. That.
Hi.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
So one of the questions, I work in both the engineering field and I've been quite active in talking with industry. People that are building sensors, people that are building that Internet of Things mesh of gathering information that can then become part of these open data sets and so on. The real question that I keep getting asked now is, what do cities want to measure? Because the sensors are available. It's possible to build them at a low cost and distribute them all over the place. The real challenge right now is that industry doesn't understand exactly what is of value.
Great question. Let's, Rod, can I ask you to answer that one a little bit? And part of the answer is, well, who's the customer? And that's part of what Dar was asking about. With the customer of what?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I was going to say. So I think it's going to depend on the sensor, the problem it's solving is really what it's be. So as an example on infrastructure, it could be, so as an example, we live now in the era of global climate change. So our municipal infrastructure on the sanitary side, can it keep pace? So the sensors on that side would measure, as an example, volume in the pipes on how many days it's over capacity or under capacity, that kind of stuff. On other sides, it could be measuring how many people come into City Hall. So I mean, it's going to vary based on the use case, but you're absolutely right. The key thing is technology needs to have a problem that it's actually solving, and it's really around the outcome you're striving for.
So I mentioned, I think autonomous vehicles will be the making of the Internet of Things. These things are going to have sensors. They're going to see 360 degrees. If you think of how many vehicles there are on the road, if you link those into a network, they're going to see everything. They're going to see how everything changes over time. Say I'm a business owner, a restaurant owner, I want to move into St. Albert. I can hire the data from these fleet of vehicles. I can learn how the other restaurants are doing, how many people are actually in those restaurants at any one time. When I set my restaurant up, I'll locate it in the best place. I can send real-time adverts to people who are on their way to other restaurants because I've profiled those people and I don't need to use facial recognition to do that. If I'm the health ministry, I can actually see how people on their daily walk are changing over time. If they're suddenly developing a change in their gait, a limp, I can preempt treatments. Let's just say the value of the data is off the charts, and it will be multiple times the value of the vehicles, and we're just waiting for the businesses and the artificial intelligence to mine that data to get the value from it.
Just to add to that, one thing that people don't necessarily realize today is the average vehicle today has about 1,300 data points that are being monitored by the onboard computer within that car. If we can mine some of that information, we would know, are the windshield wipers on? Is it raining? Are, you know, they going fast or slow? And all of those kinds of bits of information can feed into this big data.
Yeah, and thank you for those questions. I speak about the Smart City Master Plan. In the Smart City Master Plan, you can imagine on 230 pages what you're really recording so many of these creative ideas, and the challenge that council faces is which one or two are you going to provide the money for next? Because you're right, the technology is really there to tell us how much grass needs to get cut or when it needs to get cut. The technology is there to scan an intersection 360 degrees and decide whether the light should turn red or green. All that technology is there. It's just the challenge, of course, is where do you put the money and where you don't put the money, and you comes back to what I think really Haley talked about. It's just really about creativity. You can imagine just about anything that you need. You can get the data for it, and then what the heck do you do with it, or do you spend the money moving forward? One more question, and we're going to take a break. Any questions of these folks that are on stage? Yes, go ahead. Just yell it out so I can hear it. So his question is really the movement of people starts to change, the requirement for organs changes because you got fewer car accidents and all that stuff. And then superimposed on that is what's called a drone that may take you back and forth to wherever you're going. Paul, last comment up for you before we go ahead for a break.
Yeah, so average vehicle occupancy at the moment in our cities during peak period traffic flows is about 1.1 people per vehicle. If we start ride sharing those vehicles, even allowing for reduced demand of about 30%, if we can get average of 1.6 to 1.8 people per vehicle, congestion just disappears, literally disappears. The need for LRT disappears. And that's all we're doing is just getting people to share a resource. And our car sits idle 95% of the time at the moment. So what a waste of the most expensive, second most expensive resource we buy. And the ripple effects, the direct impacts of autonomous vehicles are profound. The ripple effects go into every business, every sector of government. And I estimate it's going to be about 20% of the economy, this whole autonomous vehicles and what they do. So everyone is affected, and it's going to happen very quickly. So
good.
There you go.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's give these three folks a hand for and go ahead. You can. Okay, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So that wraps up the stage part of this morning. We need to be back in our chairs at 12:20. So it's an opportunity over the next 45 minutes to network and lunch right downstairs in what's called Progress Hall. Progress Hall was funded years and years ago by the Progress Club. It does not mean very much progress. It means the Progress Club, who provided money to have it built and are providing more money to have it rebuilt over the next little while as the city improves it. So, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your lunch. Be back in your chairs at 12:20.